This is the
Five Stars
podcast.
Let me talk to you.
Hi.
So, what do you guys want to talk about? Tell me when I'm telling lies.
Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this on the Monday show. Unfortunately, no world class this week. Man, I'm telling you, I'm doing a great job bringing that whole series to closure, aren't I? Have I ever been any more inconsistent with the world class reviews than I have over the last 2 months? I'm not doing it on purpose, I swear. I just literally have no extra time throughout the weekend. I've got a formula down to a T. And if I have to deviate from that because of scheduling conflicts, it pretty much eats away at the entire podcast schedule. There's nothing I can do. Only so many hours in the day to work with. I am still going to try to review the rest of the shows that I can throughout 86. But I can't vouch that it'll be another 5 or 6 shows. If I'm lucky, maybe you'll get 3. But at least we're sacrificing the run to the litter. If I am going to have to leave out a show from the review series, sure as hell not going to go with Midsouth or WCW first. You are still tuned into the Five Starr Wrestling Report, the wrestling podcast nobody knows but everyone needs, here on YouTube and Rumble Mondays and Fridays. Make sure you subscribe and like the show if you have not already. We are here each Monday and Friday to bring you classic wrestling coverage, the wrestling discussions I wish more people would have, instead of wasting time trying to validate the modern product, which is pure and utter garbage. I understand there's a caveat that comes with reviewing AEW. A lot of the time it's rage bait that draws people in to want to hear reviews of those shows. I overstayed my welcome with that for the better part of 2 years. Even I finally had my Popeye moment with that godforsaken vanity project. And it's only gotten worse since I stopped reviewing it. WWE's become so unwatchable, I can't even deal with the PLEs anymore. The state of modern wrestling, dude, it's just... I'm waiting for things to get better. I've said, if WWE or AEW do something that's worth my time investing in, like Punk versus McIntyre, for example, I would have no issues reviewing the PLEs. But there's just nothing going on with either product right now that interests me. There are no interesting feuds or money matches. Nothing that makes me want to go out of my way to watch clips or even comment on what's going on. The John Cena retirement tour is pretty much the only thing I hear people making any mention of. And even that's been a complete flop throughout most of the year. So I'll just stick with the classic wrestling until I see something worth my time and energy going with. So now that I got on my soapbox for a good 3 minutes there, why don't we dive in with the rest of the show?
Time to wrestle, you got a gift of a lifetime. When I am floozy, trip my foot, but don't think lightning's gonna strike twice today, because you guys are going down. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we got you sisters. But once was that, again, we got it for the real fuck. And this time, Sky tells me you don't want to walk away without the belt, and I don't want to walk away. And that goofy Robin Green, she ain't going to be nowhere around. So this time, we're going to win those belts, I hope.
Was Rick Steiner drunk during that promo? I couldn't understand a goddamn word he said. Seriously, that might have been the worst Steiner's promo of all time. I watched that thing back multiple times over. I could barely make out what either guy was saying. The audio quality didn't help. But I'm also not convinced they didn't pre-game beforehand. So this week's TBS Saturday Night dealt with a lot of the fallout from the Clash. If you want to get my thoughts on that, you can go watch last week's Friday episode. Obviously now the next big event they're building to is Starrcade in December. I briefly touched on this the other week, but I wasn't the biggest advocate of Starrcade 89. Nor were a lot of people, I think. The whole round-robin tournament thing was just a theoretically good concept that didn't really fit the atmosphere of what Starrcade was supposed to be. I get why they did it. They wanted to try and be creative. But looking back, not a good decision. Now, that wasn't the only thing we had going on this week. In addition to all the fallout from the Clash, we'll get to the Steiner's Freebirds main event shortly. But they kicked it off with a 6-man tag. It's Bob Emery, Mike Justice, and Lee Scott versus the Samoan SWAT team. And this was basically just a way to get the Samoans on TV to kill some people. When I saw this as a 6-man tag, a thought did occur to me. Remember when the 6-man titles were a thing in WCW? They were about as pointless as the Western States Heritage Championship. And the Samoans took turns beating up the job guys until Fatu got the win with a big splash. We mentioned this on the Clash review as well. Now that Paulie's gone, they basically just swapped him with Humperdinck. No real reason other than the Samoans needed a mouthpiece to talk for him. There was very little thought put into it. So then they came back and replayed the footage of Doom versus the Steiners from the Clash, which they edited from the tape for time purposes, I guess. And here's where they aired a portion of that Steiner's pre-tape that I clipped at the beginning of the review. The one where they sounded drunk and totally out of it. They basically vowed they would win the tag belts from the Freebirds later on. Then they told Doom that the issue between them isn't over until they say it's over. They also threatened to beat up Woman, which is a classy thing for babyfaces to do. Then they also aired a pre-tape with Woman cutting a promo on Rick Steiner. And this is not a direct quote, but it's along the lines of what Woman was promising to do to Rick. After she got done talking about how using Rick got her to where she is now, she then vowed that she would strip Rick Steiner of his dignity, which I'm sure gave Rick a Woody. Woman could have stripped me of my dignity anytime. She also said that only good girls are filled with sugar and spice. To which I responded by saying, that is a lie. Even the good ones are flawed. At least Woman's clear with being a giant walking red flag. Still cute, though. So that took us back to the ring for Lou Tafaloni versus Flying Brian. This match looked like the before and after of a weight loss commercial for Ozempic. The only thing these guys had in common physically were the blonde mullets. Lou Tortellini, or whatever his name was. Guy looked like he ate a lot of tortellini. He had no idea what he was doing. He was not the worst jobber I've seen on the syndicated programs, but he was totally out of his element trying to work with Pillman here. They also went a while, which didn't help. There were two moves that I commented on. One was the finish when Pillman went over with a flying lariat. The other was the preceding spot when Pillman gave Tafaloni the bulldog from the second turnbuckle. When I saw that move, I had immediate flashbacks to WCW when Rick Steiner did that same move to Buff Bagwell and broke his neck. The scary part is that Lou took the bump in a very similar manner. You know, people often talk about moves that should be banned for being too dangerous. A lot of the time I think it's blown out of proportion. But I will go on record by saying, if you are going to legitimately ban a wrestling move for not being safe, or at least consider it, the bulldog out of the corner spot, not a good move to take or give. So then we had Bill Ford and Pat Rose versus the Skyscrapers. In the minutes leading up to the match, there was a clip they aired of the original pre-tape where the Skyscrapers jumped Dr. Death on TV the other week. Again, whoever taped this show and uploaded it to YouTube cut that out from the recording, so we didn't really see what happened. When I heard last week's TV main event was Dr. Death versus Sid Vicious, my immediate thought was, glad I made the choice to review the Clash of Champions instead. Because that match does not sound all too appealing on paper. No offense to Steve. So Sid and Spivey beat these guys in about a minute with the assisted powerbomb. I liked how Bill Ford refused to take the original powerbomb from Spivey, so he just tagged in Sid so he could give him the move instead. That is when you know you suck. When even the local job guys don't want to take your finish. So then, after they replayed the heel turn with the Midnights on the Dynamic Dudes from the Clash, we then get a pre-tape promo from the Dudes where they try to act tough and declare war on the Midnights. It was funny. In all fairness, it wasn't a horrible promo. But at this stage, they'd have been better off putting brown paper bags over Johnny and Shane's head for all their matches. Trying to get the people to feel sympathy for the Dudes. It's like trying to stitch a wound. Good luck with that. Then we had Jerry Price versus Dude number 1, who was Ron Simmons. I do like how they never officially referred to them as Ron and Butch during the original Doom incarnation, when they both wore the masks. Yes, they were both jacked up big black dudes, but it's not like you couldn't easily distinguish one from the other. Especially because we've seen Ron and Butch on TV multiple times over the last how many months. We take like 2 seconds to identify them. But Ron beat up Price for a few minutes and won with something resembling a lariat/choke slam. He basically shot Price into the ropes and came back and drove the guy straight down onto his head look brutal. Not really much to say beyond that, which is pretty much the case with the majority of these TV squashes. That's why I'm not harping on them for longer than necessary. I did want to mention one thing about this next pre-tape they aired with the Freebirds. Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin were basically giving each other a giant man hug. And to those who think I'm making that up, go watch the fucking tape. Hayes cut a promo while looking into the camera. Garvin had his back turned, and he had one arm draped around Hayes' shoulder and neck. I have no other way of explaining it. They were hugging each other on camera like two lovers. I don't know why, but I saw it. Plain as day. Not that there's anything wrong with dudes hugging occasionally, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. This was not the right way. At least if the goal was to prove that they weren't gay. Which, I mean, yeah, I get that's part of the gimmick. Still, we know they're not gay. That's what makes it even more hideously disturbing. So then we had Trent Knight versus the debuting Buzz Sawyer. Actually, no. Not true. It wasn't his WCW debut. He had already worked in the Mid-Atlantic area shortly back in '85 before he went to Midsouth. That's a problem with Buzz's career. He worked a lot of places, but boy, he didn't stick around for too long in those territories. Much of it due to his own stupidity. So, if I'm correct, unless he briefly worked in another area before coming back here to WCW in '89, I think this would have been right after he left Dallas. So he returns as a member of Gary Hart's J-Tex Corporation, I guess to replace Dick Slater, who, now that I think of it, where the fuck did Dick Slater go? I completely forgot about him until now. God, the turnover with talent back in the day was crazy. And I'll be the first to say, I honestly don't remember a whole lot about Sawyer's run. I mean, it's only a few years from this point where he ends up dying from a drug overdose. So this is pretty much his big final run in a major promotion. Well, big run in air quotes. Meaning that he came into work some dates and fuck if I remember anything he was ever involved with. It really is a shame, the whole story of Buzz Sawyer. Because the guy had such an unorthodox ring style. But he was so fucking nuts. It was virtually impossible to decipher when he was in gimmick or not. I mean, he really beat the shit out of Trent Knight here. Chopping the guy in the chest as hard as humanly possible. Dumping him out of the ring multiple times and tossing him around like a human rag doll. My favorite moment in this match, believe it or not, there's a spot where Tommy Young's trying to hold back Buzz so he can count Trent out of the ring. When Buzz threatens to grab Tommy and shake him around, he just puts his hands up and reveals the collar of his ref shirt. Like, dude, I'm the official here. The fuck are you doing? And Buzz backed off. He didn't hit him. Just more confirmation that Tommy Young is the greatest referee of all time. He wasn't putting up with Buzz's shit. Buzz spent a lot of time calling out Sting, Flair, and Ole, because he's going to be involved with the Horseman business going forward. So now I'm trying to think, because I know they eventually turn on Sting right after Arn comes in because they botched the whole Horseman reunion. Well, totally botched it by failing a drug test right as he and Arn were leaving the WWF. But the point remains, Jim Herd still went back on his original plans, so he's also responsible. So does that mean the feud is Flair, Ole, and Arn versus Sawyer, Muda, and presumably Kendo Nagasaki? Or the Dragon Master, as they're calling him now. Why don't I remember anything about that feud? Because that has to be the direction they're going. I just don't remember a single thing about how they got there. Actually, wait. Fuck, yes I do. Now I remember. That's the cage match they did in February at the Clash in Corpus Christi when Sting tried to climb the cage and blew out his ACL. Okay, so... yeah, go figure. I remember Sting getting hurt in the ankle, but I had almost zero memory of who was actually a part of that initial cage match. Because the whole thing doesn't make any fucking sense. When you really think about it, the JTEX Corporation are heels, but then they're also going to be facing the Horsemen, who literally just turned heel on Sting in the same show. At least I think it was the same show. So it's going to be heel versus heel for some odd reason. I like how I figured all that out just by going back and reviewing a random Buzz Sawyer squash. I don't know if I mentioned this. Probably don't need to. He won with a big splash. By the way, a splash off the top rope, which apparently was not a DQ. But I'm not about to open that can of worms. The off-the-top rope stipulation that came and went over the next 10 plus years. So we eventually came back for a Kevin Sullivan pre-tape. He basically talked about how deceivious woman is. I think he meant devious. And or deceiving. Guess it's a good way to combine the words. I honestly had no clue what he was rambling about. Something about how he doesn't know who's going to come out on the other end between Doom and the Steiners. For some reason he cares. If there's one thing Sullivan does know, it's that he's too smart to get caught in the crossfires of a woman. Yeah. There's a comment that aged like sour milk. He also had a match with Tommy Angel. This is kind of one of those classic Kevin Sullivan brawls where he goes out there and beats somebody up all around ringside. We didn't get anything involving these two brawling up into the women's bathroom, which is a Kevin Sullivan staple in the latter years of WCW, especially when he was feuding with Benoit. But it was a fun little match. Angel actually got in a lot more offense than I was expecting here. The only thing I didn't like about it, and it was something that JR brought to my attention when he referenced Buzz Sawyer, this is practically a carbon copy of the exact same brawl style we saw in the previous match with Trent Knight. Like, there was nothing different about the pacing or the style of this match compared to the Buzz one. It was Sullivan beating the teetotal shit out of Angel for several minutes, until he finally put him away with a pair of running knee lifts in the corner. There was nothing bad about it, but it was like watching the exact same match back on replay. You know, at least if you're going to have similar style workers doing the same style match on TV, spread it out over the course of the 2 hours. Don't do them in back-to-back segments. That just defeats the whole purpose. I guess it's a minor nitpick, but it was still something that bothered me. In any case, let's go to the TV main event for the World Tag Team Championships. The totally not gay Freebirds defending against Rick and Scott Steiner. I did like the dual Sissies Freebirds chants that broke out. Crowd was actually really hot for this match. And they were hot through pretty much the entire 20-plus minute ordeal. This thing went through 2 commercial breaks, and the crowd never came down for any of it. They were with the action from the opening bell. Credit to them. Double heat sequences on Rick and Scott. One of the things they had going on out during the match was Woman coming out to scout. JR doing his best to hide his chauvinistic comments. I kid. But he was pretty ruthless with her. And let me say this. I've been openly critical about a lot of the Freebirds run in '89. I still wasn't a fan of the Freebird 2.0 run with Garvin. That being said, this is a hell of a tag team main event. Like, even with Rick and Scott being booked to win the belts ahead of time, it didn't hurt the match with the Freebirds knowing that they were going to have to drop the belts. They had a decent attitude about it. They made Rick and Scott look like monsters here, which goes against a lot of how the Freebirds worked in '89, especially when they had the fucking belts. But especially during the comeback, when it was Rick and Scott's turn to run wild, they made him look good. Set up the deal where Rick missed a leapfrog and accidentally bumped his brother. And as the ref was trying to get Scotty back to his corner, they set up the spot where Rick had Hayes down on the mat. And when Garvin went to try and drop a knee over the back of Rick's head, we moved out of the way. So then Rick shit-canned Garvin and got the pin on Hayes immediately. I mean, it was a slip on a banana peel type finish, but a win's a win. It was a massive pop for the Steiners going over. They had all the locker room babyfaces come out to congratulate them. Try to sell it like a big deal. And they also gave Rick and Scott a post-match interview with JR where, they promised earlier on that they would win the belts, and now they're going to hold on to them for a very long time. They didn't really mention anything about Woman here. Come to think of it, she pretty much disappeared from the whole equation with no follow-up. She was out there, but she played no role in the finish. And they're obviously going to be setting up the program with Steiners versus Doom over the belts. But yeah, strange how Woman just kind of vanished into the ether. all things considered, a really strong TV main event. And looking back, again, not a knock on Garvin and Hayes, but I do have to ask a question. What the hell is the point of their title run? Aside from beating the Midnight Express in the tournament finals over the summer, they didn't do jack shit with those things. They had the belts for like 4 months, barely ever defended them. It's like they were so busy trying to smash over the dudes in the skyscrapers, they forgot that Hayes and Garvin were the champions all that time. I mean, the title change was a much-needed decision. I just don't know why they put the belts on him in the first place. I mean, it was either them or the Midnights. We all know what Jim Herd thinks of the Midnight Express. Oh yeah, speaking of things that weren't followed up on, do they make any mention of Woman's Bodyguard from the Clash? Not only was he not seen on the show, I don't think he was ever mentioned. Did they forget? Or did the angle flop so badly they just immediately dropped it after the Clash? I mean, it wasn't a great angle, granted. But I would have thought they'd have at least shown him on camera. I guess it's an omen for a lot of the upcoming bad shit we were about to deal with in the coming year. At least Flair's still part of the booking committee for another couple months. But yeah, the honeymoon phase is fast approaching its end. And after Ole kind of takes over and starts overseeing a lot of the booking, shows are about to get a whole lot more insufferable. So last week's Midsouth program was very story-heavy. The 2 big things we established were the Rock and Roll Midnight Scaffold match for the tag belts. We also had Skandar Akbar trying to recruit Butch Reed as part of his faction. And after Butch turned down the offer, he and Hacksaw Duggan decided to put their past issues aside and team up to challenge the heels. So first we had a buddy pre-tape at the top of the show where he basically vowed that he would get even with Hacksaw Butch Reed for putting his hands on him the other week. We'll come back to that conversation. Then we very quickly dived in with Ted DiBiase versus Magnum TA. Hell of a way to open the program. First time I recollect seeing these guys wrestle, at least in singles competition. They really went to town on one another here. Some nice solid back and forth pacing. Great build to Magnum's comeback when he reversed the pile driver attempt and started laying into DiBiase. He eventually set him up for the belly to belly. Then as DiBiase got his foot under the bottom rope before the pin, that's when Ernie Ladd came out and started taunting Magnum TA from the floor by holding up the North American title and turning Magnum's attention away from the match. Gotta love stupid baby faces, right? So DiBiase loaded up the glove and sucker punched Magnum to get the win. The setup for it was a bit stagey, because at first, both Magnum and the ref, Ronnie West, could deliberately see DiBiase loading up his glove with a gimmick. So you get this awkward moment where Magnum has to turn his attention back to Ernie, so he had to pretend like he never saw DiBiase. Not really the best execution, but it got the job done. We're obviously dealing with discrete feuds right now between Magnum and DiBiase, so this is mainly a way to get some heat on the bad guys. Then when we came back, we got a status update on Hacksaw Reed. Joel Watts informed us during the Magnum DiBiase match that Butch was seen leaving the Irish McNeil Boys Club. They couldn't figure out why he left. We were then told that Reed got an emergency phone call about his brother suffering a severe construction accident, which conveniently occurred during a Midsouth TV taping when Butch Reed was booked to wrestle on the card. How about them odds? So when Boyd's in the ring trying to explain the news to everybody, including Buddy Landell, of course Buddy's calling bullshit, saying Butch Reed didn't want to deal with the consequences of being embarrassed. That's why he left the building. So as he's calling out someone from the locker room to answer his open challenge, we do get an answer, and he comes in the form of Brickhouse Brown. Tells Buddy that they've been stirring it up all over the Mid-South area recently, and they've got some unsettled business to finish. So we get Budrow versus Brickhouse. Brickhouse said that they have unsettled business. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Brickhouse beat this guy like 3 times? In fact, I believe that was Brickhouse's debut in Mid-South, when he scored 2 back-to-back upset pinfalls over Buddy on TV. Not exactly sure what he means by unsettled business. As far as I'm concerned, Brickhouse has nothing to prove. Now, of course, Buddy's doubly pissed off. He didn't get Butch. And now he's got to recall back to when the rookie upset him on TV 3 times. Twice in a row in 1 week. The thing I find hilarious about the Butch Reed situation, even though we know it's a complete work, I like how the announcers are treating the situation with complete sincerity. Like, you know for a fact if a heel tried to present the same situation, the announcers would immediately be skeptical. So they had their match here. And even though Brickhouse got in some early offense, they pretty much served him up as fodder to get over Buddy. Clean as a sheet. 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. Budrow dropped the big elbow and got the win. So he's finally avenged his longtime rival that he couldn't get a win over to save his life. Now he's got even more of a reason to rub it in Hacksaw's face. Hopefully the brother comes out all right. Construction accident. That could be anything. Did he fall off a scaffold? Did he get run over with a pile driver? What kind of work was he doing? Well, spoiler. We found out what actually happened to Butch's brother later in the program. From there, we were supposed to get our advertised football helmet challenge between Dr. Death and Hacksaw Duggan, the one they've had to defer for several weeks now. Well, guess what happened? We got another impromptu challenge. This time it's Ted DiBiase calling out Duggan and telling him to get his head out of the scrapbook. Forget the helmet. Forget all that nonsense. Pro wrestling is the real king of sports. And if Duggan wants to fight so bad, he can come face the man he's been calling out for the last some odd weeks. So Duggan eventually answers the challenge. He and DiBiase exchanging brief fisticuffs. And as they're brawling, we get a great moment where Dr. Death comes down to the ring, dressed in full football garb. He basically made himself a human brick wall. And as soon as Duggan tried to charge him and tackle him to the ground, Dr. Death no-sells it and lets Duggan bounce off him like a pinball. He looked like such a dork. And so, of course, that opened the door for the rest of the Akbar Army to run out and help him beat down Duggan. That wasn't until the locker room babyfaces ran out and made the save. I just love the visual of Dr. Death coming into the ring dressed from head to toe in his full football gear. And right as Duggan tried to go after him, he just eats shit. He was no match for the shoulder pads and the jersey plate. I guess Dr. Death did have a week to plan for some sort of scheme. He knew ahead of time this match was booked. Figuring Duggan was going to accept the challenge, he said to himself, "I've got the perfect plan. I'll wear my full football uniform and become invincible." Duggan's not smart enough to wear his full football uniform. Well, he was right. He got the better of Duggan this week. Should have planned better. So then we get Hercules Hernandez versus Master G, which was not good in the slightest. God bless Hercules, but he was not a strong enough worker to carry Master G to a reasonably good TV match. Remember when I brought up that whole topic of me generally not being a fan of big guy versus big guy matches, unless one of the guys involved can just pick the other guy up and throw him around with ease? Well, Hercules sadly did not do any of that here. So it basically turned into a brick wall butting heads with a cement truck. He ended up going after Master G's knee by running it into the ring post. And after Hercules worked the knee over for long enough, Master G tried to elevate Hercules for an atomic drop, but the leg gave out. So Hercules slapped on a single leg Boston for the ref stoppage. Another clean victory for the heel. I never said the match was appalling, just not good. And again, just like the Brickhouse deal, they went from trying to push Master G as a top babyface to now he's jobbing to Hercules in the middle of the show in a 4-minute squash. So you can tell Watts has jumped off that bandwagon quicker than a hiccup, because he knew it wasn't getting over. And he certainly wasn't going to keep trying. That brought us to Jim Horton and Thomas Ivy versus the Rock and Roll Express. Just another short little TV squash to put the babyfaces over. Thomas Ivy, he had quite the man tits. Those things were jiggling around like a silicone sex doll. It was revolting. Ricky and Robert won with a double dropkick in like 90 seconds. Nothing else to note outside Thomas Ivy's juggalos. Believe it or not, there also really wasn't much to say about Bill Dundee versus Adrian Street outside the finish. Before I talk about that, though, let's circle back to the Butch Reed stuff. So he's at the announce position with JR and Joel. Oh yeah, he's back. And boys, he's steaming. He's got a bombshell to drop. Turns out everything we heard earlier about his brother was a complete hoax. Somebody played him. Pee Wee Anderson drove Reed all the way to the airport, and just as Reed was getting set to board the plane, he gave his folks a call from home. turns out his brother is alive and well. Ain't nothing wrong with Butch's brother. There was no accident. And all the while, he got back to the Irish McNeil Boys Club and heard about Hacksaw Duggan getting jumped by a bunch of Akbar's goons. He at one point called Skandar a camo junkie, which I laughed at. And rightfully, Butch is pissed off. And he's going to be breathing down the Army's neck like never before. They done fucked with the wrong guy. It is interesting because you wonder who got the message out. One would suppose it was Buddy Landell. But what the hell is going on with Pee Wee Anderson? He's got some explaining to do. If he was bought off, and he was told to deliberately lie to Butch about his brother, he's going to have to answer to that, right? One would assume. All 140 pounds of him. So we do get Dundee versus Street. And it was a TV title match. I know we've kind of gone away from the whole Adrian Street TV championship story recently. I think that mostly has to do with Terry Taylor being off with an injury right now. Didn't leave Adrian with a whole lot to do. So he and Dundee have a solid technical wrestling match. Both guys worked hard. There was a spot where Linda tripped up Dundee right in front of the referee, which is not a great shot. That allowed for Street to work over Dundee for a bit, using a lot of that hard-hitting British-style offense. And Street wound up missing an elbow charge near the ropes. Dundee fought back and gave Street a monkey flip out of the corner. There was a shoot-off spot. And then he caught Street with a crossbody dive and got the 3. Just like that. Bill Dundee is the new TV champion. And I know that'll rub all the internet fans the wrong way. Seeing the Booker put himself over and win one of the company's regional titles. I know it's the TV championship we're talking about, so it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things. And it's kind of similar with how they took the medal off Terry Taylor without making him look like a total punk. Because it was a flash roll-up after Street made out with him, the focus of the finish wasn't even the fact that Terry got pinned. It was him being embarrassed because another dude kissed him on camera. With Street losing here, I mean, it wasn't like Dundee beat him flat with his finish and left him on his back. Street got right back up, tried to pitch a fit afterward, made it seem like a fluke. So he had an outing. I was okay with it. Again, it's the TV championship, people. Let's not get totally bent out of shape. It's not like Dundee booked himself to beat Ernie Ladd for the North American title flat in the middle of the ring in 30 seconds. Then we closed it out with a quick standby match. Hector and Chavo versus Lee Ramsey and Art Cruz. Didn't have a ton of time here, so they really kept things moving at a breakneck pace. They let Art and Lee get some quick offense in at the beginning. Chavo and Hector turned it around. And they initially get the pin, but then they try to beat up both guys after the bell, which effectively caused them to overturn the decision. Although it wasn't really clarified, because they immediately pitched back to the interview desk for a Magnum TA promo. So did they get DQ'd? Guess we'll never know. Probably don't want to acknowledge that little record blemish on the Guerrero's part. losing to Art Cruz and Lee Gordon Ramsay, as opposed to Gordon Lee Ramsay. There's no way his middle name was actually Gordon. If it was, swear to God. Anyway, wrapping up here, Magnum did a quick promo where he challenged either Ted DiBiase or Ernie Ladd to a cage match on television next week. And he specified he didn't care who it was, he just wanted a piece of either guy. Okay, far be it for me to question babyface logic. Wouldn't it make more rational sense for Magnum to face Ernie in the cage? Considering there's a world championship at stake in that situation? As opposed to him wrestling DiBiase for, what, bragging rights? Who gives a fuck about that? Apparently Magnum. It is kind of cool, though, them advertising a cage match on Midsouth next week. First time ever. I guess the cage alone is sort of the selling point in that particular equation. Not so much who Magnum faces. But that's also a good hook, because we don't know who it's going to be. Could be both. Then Magnum's really in trouble. We'll see how it goes down next week on television. But that was the show. And this one. Again, apologies that I couldn't fit the World Class show in this week, but it is what it is. I had a former work colleague that hated when I said that. I would do it all the time just to piss him off. All right. So, the deal right now, temporarily, I'm planning on doing a Monday show. However, I also might be traveling out of town for a work job, so I don't entirely know if it's going to happen. Frankly, we're not even sure if we're leaving by the end of the week. So, if there's not a Monday show, don't be surprised. If there is, you get a freebie. As I mentioned before, schedule's going to get really, really hectic over the next month. So if you see me kind of in and out here with the podcast, it's all work related, I promise. So stay tuned, keep the notification bell turned on, and still come back and check the show out every Monday and Friday, just to keep tabs. We'll see everyone and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks all. Take care and peace out.